You were both in Skull and Bones, the secret society.
It's so secret we can't talk about it.
What does that mean for America? The conspiracy theorists are going to go
I'm
wild.
sure they are. I don't know. I haven't seen the web.
Number 322?
First of all, he's not the nominee. And, look, I look forward...
Are you prepared to lose?
No, I'm not going to lose. No, I'm not going to lose. No, I'm not going to lose.
From ABC News, This Week with Sam Donaldson and Cokie Roberts.
An election in turmoil, a presidency in the balance, a nation waits. Who will emerge the winner in the historic Florida recount? We'll get the latest and speak with the man leading George Bush's efforts there, former Secretary of State James Baker. And we'll hear from Al Gore's advisor, former Secretary of State Warren Christopher.
Plus, once someone does win, how will he get anything done? And how long can this standoff last? We'll ask two of Washington's most seasoned politicians, House Democratic leader Dick Gebhardt and Bob Dole, former Senate Majority Leader.
That's This Week with George Will and George Stephanopoulos. Now, from Washington, Sam Donaldson. And from Tallahassee, Florida, Cokie Roberts.
Welcome to our program. Here in Florida, the presidential contest gets tighter by the hour. With the new counts going on, ABC News has an unofficial tally now that George Bush leads by 279 votes. That's unofficial, but it's very close. And last night, in the middle of the night in Palm Beach County, election officials decided to count all of the ballots by hand. That's more than 400,000 votes. ABC's Jackie Judd is in Palm Beach. She joins us now. Jackie?
Good morning, Cokie. The canvassing commissioners did spend all day, all night recounting by hand 1% of the vote, with particular attention, of course, to those ballots that had been cast, but the machine had counted as no vote. When all was said and done, Gore gained 33 votes, Bush gained 14. That was a net gain for Gore of 19 votes. So one of the canvassing commissioners came out to cameras and said, look, if Gore gained 19 votes from 1% of those being recounted, it is conceivable that he could gain 1,900 if everything was recounted. And so she then called for a county-wide hand count of all the ballots.
I believe the people of Palm Beach County have entrusted us with the power to voice their right to participate in their government. And given the totality of the circumstances here, I move that this board conduct a manual recount of all the ballots for the presidential election for the year 2000.
Quite honestly, this is a situation that I think is new to everyone. I believe we have the authority to request of the Secretary of State or Department of Elections an advisory opinion, and it would be my intent as chair to do that.
Ultimately, there was some more debate. The commission did vote, though, 2-1 for that recount. Cokie?
Jackie, how were those votes counted?
Do you have an hour? I can explain it. It was pretty complicated. First, you have to know that the punch hole is called a chad. It is attached to the ballot by 4 threads. In the morning, the commissioners had decided that if it had been detached by only 1 thread, it would not be counted as a vote. 2 detachments, maybe. 3 definitely counted as a vote. At some point in the process, that was changed. And the commissioners decided that any chad that was detached to any degree would be counted as a vote.
What are you going as? Oh, like I even need to ask.
Hey, I want the slutty pumpkin to recognize me, and she knows me as a hanging chad. What? She thought it was hilarious.
Yeah, 4 years ago, but nobody remembers what the hell a hanging chad is.
What a sad commentary on our national attention span, that we could forget such a turbulent time in our political history.
Sam.
Now, there are 2 other strange-sounding categories that were not counted as votes. The first one is called the dimpled chad. That is that there is an indentation in the chad. The voter put some pressure on it, but didn't detach it at all from the ballot. Not counted. The final category is the pregnant chad. That is, the chad was pierced with a hole, but not detached at all. Those were not counted. Now, the Republicans here, Koki, seized on all of this confusion. They said, see, we told you this is a deeply flawed process. It must stop. But as we know, the county commissioners here have decided not to stop. They will go for a full recount beginning tomorrow.
Well, it does sound quite interesting, Jackie. Thank you.
No, I'm not going to lose. No, I'm not going to lose.
Stay with us. We're about to take you on an exciting and bumpy ride. All eyes on Florida at this hour, Tim. Both campaigns made an enormous investment there. Project an important win for Vice President Al Gore. NBC News projects that he wins the 25 electoral votes in the state of Florida. That's great news in Nashville tonight.
That is a very, very, very important state for Al Gore. And now the pressure is on George W. Bush in Pennsylvania and Michigan.
The stunner at this hour is that we can call Al Gore the winner in the Wolverine state. And we're skipping ahead to Illinois. Al Gore the winner there.
These Midwest battleground states, which George Bush's campaign thought they were going to be very competitive in, they haven't won one yet. And with Michigan and Illinois and Pennsylvania too close to call, but you add Michigan and Illinois to Florida, and Al Gore's people must be feeling very good about now.
No, I'm not going to lose.
Again, we are told the vice president will concede the election in his brief remarks here tonight.
This is what you call close. This is the state of Florida. 99.87% of the vote has been counted so far. The Secretary of State has Al Gore trailing the president-elect in the state that proved to be pivotal by 565 votes.
Is that he has actually called George W. Bush and taken back his concession phone call.
The most significant point here, we're not seeing Governor Bush because Al Gore has conceded, rather has recanted that concession that he gave earlier on this evening. So stand by, I'll try to get a little bit more information and I'll get it to you as soon as I can.
But this race is simply too close to call. And until the recount is concluded and the results of Florida become official, our campaign continues.
Latest vote count in the state of Florida shows Governor Bush winning that state by more than 1,200 votes.
Tom, thank all of you for this long evening. It's going to be a long day ahead.
The people, my people are so smart. And you know what else they say about my people? The polls. They say, I have the most loyal people. Did you ever see that? Where I could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and I wouldn't lose any voters, okay? It's like incredible.
So we've just seen live pictures of President Obama campaigning for Hillary Clinton in Ohio. Now, Moody's says the president's high approval ratings are one of the factors that will put Hillary Clinton into the White House.
I can't trust this country to someone who's gone bankrupt 6 times. That's 2 more than me.
A lot of people say you guys predicted Trump's run.
I know. We'll take credit for anything.
As you know, we've inherited quite a budget crunch from President Trump.
Simpsons predicted the future shot by shot because we're part of the Illuminati. Which is true, we are.
Remember those lighthearted days? Remember that was just funny? Remember there was nothing else? The planet wasn't in danger. We weren't in danger personally. It was just a gag.
I just started drawing pictures of Homer floating around in Trump's hair. And, you know, it's this whole sort of back and forth thing that they write something, I draw something, and, you know, and then the team draws something. It's fantastic.
This is all about Freemasonry, this world of duality. Let's take a listen to this scene here from The Simpsons.
They're all covered with filthy germs, aren't they, Smithers?
Why, what do you mean, sir?
Freemasons run the country!
Not only this country, but the entire world. People need to understand. It's not a question if someone's a Mason. You know, in Hollywood, the music industry, all these people on the very top of this world, they're all Masons. Everybody underneath that are non-Masons, we just get the crumbs in this world. Taking a look at Sylvester Stallone, Matt Groening, the creator of The Simpsons, and John Carpenter of They Live, Halloween, and so many other movies. These are all Freemasons, once again. So, when you look at any directors, writers, or producers in Hollywood, you know they're Masons. It's not a question if. It's only Masons make it to the top of this world. Now, all the connections when it comes to Matt Groening, and you see here, they're all doing the Eye of Illumination, because they're all part of this exclusive club, you know, better known in the mainstream as the Illuminati, which is actually Freemasonry. Illuminati is just a cover for Freemasonry. That's what it's all about. basically Club 33, the highest degree in the Scottish Rite of Freemasonry. Taking a look at all the connections, again, when it comes to Matt Groening, for anybody that doubts he's a Freemason, like everybody else in Hollywood, and again, everybody else that makes the top of this world. Take a look here. Again, when you take a look at the Simpsons, everybody's seen this. Very famous with Bart Simpson holding the money. You see the magazine held by Lisa. New York, you see the 9 and the 11, of course. As I mentioned many times, the towers came down after 33 years. Construction first started in 1968. The towers, of course, came down in 2001. This was nothing more than a Freemasonic ritual. Now, more connections made here with the Simpsons. You have the Simpson family, parking right in front of a 33-cent store.
On mail-in ballots, why are you opposed to mail-in ballots when they cannot be hacked by foreign interest or reference?
Absentee ballots are great. You request a ballot, you can't be, I signed an absentee ballot. Absentee ballots are great. They work, they've been proven, they're good like in Florida. But this universal mail-in is a very dangerous thing. It's fraught with fraud and every other thing that can happen. And we have to be very, very careful. We have a very big election coming up. I think we're going to do very well. And I want to make sure the election is not stolen. And so does everybody else. And I'm sure both sides feel that way. So we have to be very careful with this universal mail-in ballot.
There's an old saying in Tennessee, I know it's in Texas, probably in Tennessee, that says, fool me once, shame on you. If fool me, we can't get fooled again.
Fool me, can't get fooled again. Can't get fooled again. Can't get fooled again. Can't get fooled again. Can't get fooled again.
She said that basically psychographics should be classified as a weapon.
She said that basically psychographics should be classified as a weapon.
We bombarded them through blogs, websites, articles, videos, ads, every platform you can imagine.
Psychographically.
Until they saw the world the way we wanted them to.
Psychographically.
Until they voted for our candidate. To change your behavior.
To change your behavior.
You send your data out, it gets analyzed, and it comes back at you as targeted messaging.
Crooked Hillary, and the zeros, the OO of crooked were a pair of handcuffs. We made creative, hundreds of different kinds of creative, and we put it online. She belongs behind it. And you have created this? Defeat Crooked. And then we just put information into the bloodstream in the internet and then watch it grow. And so this stuff infiltrates the online community. Infiltrates the online community. And expands. But with no branding. So it's unattributable, untrackable. Infiltrates the online community.
Matthew 24, 4-8. And Jesus answered and said unto them, Take heed that no man deceive you. For many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. And you shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that you be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines and pestilence and earthquakes in diverse places. All these are the beginning of sorrows. The verse we're going to single in on is verse 7. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. The way this scripture is worded in English would lead modern English speakers to think that the Messiah was just repeating himself when he said nation versus nation and kingdom versus kingdom. But the reality is that these words have a distinct meaning. The word nation used here in Greek is ethnos, which is where we get the English word ethnicity. Also, the English word nation would be understood by non-modern English-speaking people to be nationality. The word for kingdom is basilia, which means kingdom, country, or leadership over a country. So what we see the Messiah prophesying is about a coming race war, or a war among the heathen. Right now in America, and other parts of the world for that matter, we see a divide between races or ethnicity that is growing at a rapid rate. Whether instigated by the mainstream media or not, the tensions are escalating. Even so-called Christians who are supposed to be citizens of another ethnos or kingdom that is not of this world are getting their words in and reacting to their flesh feelings. After the election of Donald Trump, many races have felt like they no longer have a voice in our country. They are reminded of a time when they were lesser citizens and were treated accordingly. During Obama's presidency, white Americans felt like they were losing control, while they felt their money they had worked hard for their entire life was to be taken away through taxation and given to those that were not working for it. Although neither of these things are fully true, the media has played an important role in affirming their fears. The fact is that this country was founded for and by occultists. They have continued to assert control and slavery through taxation, media, and medical witchcraft. What is better than a slave that pays for their own health care, housing, and food? They would no longer be bound to the burden of taking care of their slaves. They would take a cut of everyone's money and give their slaves the appearance of freedom. Also, they would no longer only have black and Irish slaves, but all Americans would be slaves and would pay their dues.
Mr. Jones owned a cotton plantation and many slaves. One day he was talking to the owner of the plantation next to his, and Mr. Jones was lamenting the fact that times were tough. He was having to work his slaves harder than ever, and was having trouble with some of them being disobedient or trying to run away. The other plantation owner said he knew someone who could help.
Day 1.
One day Mr. Jones called his slaves together so a man named Mr. Smith could talk to them. Before beginning, Mr. Smith whispered to Mr. Jones, "Whatever I say, do not contradict me or interfere, and I promise you your slave troubles will end." "My name is Mr. Smith," he said to the slaves, "and this may be the happiest day of your lives. From today forward, you will no longer be slaves, but free men." Mr. Jones was so shocked he started to step forward, but Mr. Smith gestured for him to remain silent. He did, only because the other plantation owner had spoken so highly of Mr. Smith's skills. "You are no longer the property of Mr. Jones," Mr. Smith continued. "You are free. No more will you be forced to labor for the benefit of Mr. Jones. Now you can work for yourselves." Now the slaves were all murmuring and looking at each other. Many were smiling, many were looking puzzled. "In fact, you are now free to leave the plantation whenever you want," Mr. Smith said. "However, since we are surrounded by other plantations, if you leave, some other plantation owner will likely claim you as his own the moment you set foot on his property. So I urge you not to risk your newfound freedom by doing something so foolish. Instead, I suggest that you stay here, no longer as slaves, but as willing participants and part owners of this plantation. Yes, this is now your plantation." Mr. Jones bit his tongue to keep from objecting. "For now, we might as well leave Mr. Jones in charge," said Mr. Smith, "since he's the only one with any experience at running a plantation, which is quite a complicated thing to manage. But he will no longer be your master, but just another worker on the plantation. In fact, he will now be using his organizational and management skills to serve you. Whatever problems you may have had with him before, you are now all equals, and you need each other to make this work. If we all cooperate and work together, we can all reap the benefits together. In honor of this happy occasion, I present you this new symbol of togetherness and cooperation, this flag, which shall be the emblem of the new, free Jones plantation." He held up the new flag, but most of those listening were still too amazed to respond. "And this shall be our motto," Mr. Smith announced. "We work together as free men for our mutual benefit, pledging our allegiance to the Jones plantation, which stands for prosperity, liberty, and justice for all. To celebrate, everyone has the rest of the day off. Enjoy your freedom, do as you please, and be back here tomorrow morning, bright and early, so that we may begin work on this great and noble new endeavor as equal free men." Finally convinced that Mr. Smith was serious, the former slaves applauded and cheered.
Day 2.
"We all want this plantation to do well," Mr. Smith said at the beginning of the next meeting, "so we can all share the benefits. We all know that it takes a lot of effort to make a cotton plantation work. Just because you're all free doesn't mean you can stop working. In fact, since you're now working for yourselves, I expect you to work even harder than ever before, but now with pride and joy, knowing that you're working for yourselves. Of course, there still have to be rules. If everyone just does whatever he wants, the plantation won't produce anything. This experiment will fail, and we'll all starve. You should be thankful that Mr. Jones has agreed to stay on to lend his knowledge and skills to this endeavor, and I trust you will all do your own part to make this work. Several of you have been chosen to act as project supervisors to manage different aspects of the operation, to make sure everyone is doing his assigned job, to make sure that the rules are followed, and so on. The rest of you may head out to the fields to start your first day of work as free men."
Day 3.
The next morning, Mr. Smith had a grim expression on his face as the daily meeting began. "I have an unpleasant duty to do today," he said. "Yesterday, Charles was caught keeping some of the cotton he picked, presumably to sell for his own personal profit. That is against the rules. That is stealing. For that, Charles must be punished. 2 men tied Charles to the whipping post. I take no joy in this, Mr. Smith continued, but you must understand, if we do not maintain order, if we do not have rules that we all abide by, then the plantation will fail, and we will all suffer. The whip cracked against Charles' back. But if we all pitch in for the common good, then we can all prosper. Being free doesn't mean you should be selfish and greedy. We must each do our assigned duties and obey the rules, and then we can all benefit, and each of you will receive your appropriate share of the profits. A young man named Samuel stepped forward. But if you and Mr. Jones decide the rules and whip us if we disobey, how is that any different from what we had before? How can you say that? Mr. Smith asked. I'm shocked. You were a slave before, and now you're free. Things still need to be managed and organized by those best qualified to do so. Do you know how to run a plantation, Samuel? Well, no, he answered. But if we're free, why do we get no say in what the rules are and how things work? I'm surprised at your ingratitude, Mr. Smith answered. None of you know how a plantation is run, so you're in no position to be making decisions about how things are done here. You don't seem to appreciate all the things that Mr. Jones provides for you, from protecting you from all the outside threats that you know nothing about, those who would come here, capture and enslave you, if not for Mr. Jones' protection, to making sure that you all have food and housing, tools to work with, that you're cared for when sick and injured, and so on. There wouldn't be a plantation at all, no cotton to pick, no land to plant and harvest, if not for him. You should be grateful that he's made possible the level of comfort you now have. Your lives would be far worse if not for him. Nevertheless, as free and equal participants in this endeavor, from now on at each meeting, any worker may have 2 minutes to ask questions or voice suggestions or complaints. With that, the workers all seemed satisfied and headed out again to the fields to pick the cotton.
Day 4.
I have a big announcement, Mr. Smith said as the daily meeting began. Mr. Jones' cousin is here, and not just to visit and see how our project is coming along. It has been decided that from now on, you will be deciding who will manage the plantation. Of course, this job can't be done by just anyone, but every 3 months we will have a special meeting at which all the workers will vote on whether we think Mr. Jones should run the plantation or whether we think his cousin, Mr. Johnson, should run the plantation. That means that ultimately you are in charge because you will be deciding which man you want running things on your behalf. If you don't like the way things are being managed, you now have the power to change it. Amazed and pleased, the workers headed out again to the fields to pick the cotton. Days passed, months passed, a year passed, and the plantation continued to operate as before. Sometimes Mr. Jones was in charge, sometimes Mr. Johnson was in charge, but the day-to-day routine stayed exactly the same. The workers worked hard, long hours every day, and still had little to show for it. Every day the meeting would begin with them all reciting the Jones Plantation motto, "We work together as free men for our mutual benefit, pledging our allegiance to the Jones Plantation, which stands for prosperity, liberty, and justice for all." One day Mr. Smith announced, "Samuel is asked to say a few words this morning, and whatever the rest of us may think of his ideas and opinions, we are all free here, and that means we are all allowed to speak our minds. So, Samuel, you have 2 minutes. Begin." Samuel stepped forward, looking scared. "I was excited when all this started," he began, glancing nervously at Mr. Smith and Mr. Jones. "But don't you all see what's happened here? Nothing's changed. We're all still slaves." There were grumbles of disagreement from the crowd. "They tell us what to do and whip us if we don't. They still make all the rules and punish us if we disobey. They let us make suggestions and complain about things, but they never really change anything. They let us choose between Mr. Jones and Mr. Johnson, but what's the difference? The situation stays the same. We do all of the work and they take as much as they want and decide how much they'll let us keep. They live in luxury, made rich by the cotton we pick. We do all the work and have to build our own huts, grow our own food, and take care of ourselves. They leave us just enough that we don't revolt or run away. This is not freedom. We're all still slaves. They've only changed the words they use, but nothing else has changed. They say we're all free and equal, but we're not. They command and we obey. That's not freedom. That's not equality. They say we're free to leave, but all that means is that we're free to be someone else's slave. Why should we work or obey the rules? We didn't agree to this. They made the system. They forced it on us. They control and rob us and call it freedom. They've deceived you into thinking that being able to choose which slave master you'll work for is the same as being free. It's not. Open your eyes. If you keep what you produce, they call it stealing. When they take what you produce, they call it sharing and fair distribution. Can't you see that this is all your time? He's up, Samuel, Mr. Smith announced calmly. At his gesture, 2 supervisors grabbed Samuel by the arms and led him to the whipping post. "I'm sorry, Samuel, but you've broken the rules. There are rules against encouraging others not to work and encouraging others to break the rules. You're only hurting all of us with your discontentment and your complaining and your disobedience." The whip fell and Samuel let out a grunt. "Without rules, without order, all would be lost. Without law, there would be chaos. We can't just behave as wild animals, each doing whatever he pleases. We must all follow the plan and all do our duty for the betterment of everyone. And those who do not must be punished." The whip fell again and blood flowed freely from Samuel's back. "Samuel, it is you who are stealing from the others. When you don't do your assigned work, you are making more work for others. When you disobey the rules, it is you who are endangering the future of everyone else here. You are the thief. You are the criminal. You are the one trying to destroy the arrangement that keeps us all safe and prosperous. At every lash of the whip, the other workers cheered louder and louder, some yelling curses at Samuel. Being spoiled and selfish, you complain about everything, talking as if you're oppressed. But you are the one ruining things. You are the one keeping us from being all we could be. It is your greed and your rebelliousness that is hurting all of us. They all play by the rules, Mr. Smith said, gesturing at the others. What makes you think that you don't have to? You think you're above the law? There were loud yells of agreement as the whip fell again. We must maintain order, Mr. Smith proclaimed, to make this plantation great, to make it so that we can all be happy and prosperous. To have the society we want, there have to be rules. We all have to contribute our fair share to this great endeavor, and we cannot tolerate actions and attitudes that seek to undermine the amazing things that together as free men we have achieved and will continue to achieve. Mr. Jones was smiling as he gave Mr. Smith a pat on the back. The crowd was cheering so loudly that none of them had noticed that Samuel had died.
I've heard you put down about everybody that's run for president lately. Who should we be looking at for the next election?
Nobody that they offer you. See, you don't have a choice. You don't choose who runs, and you think that if you elect one or the other, that you're going to get a good choice. I'm telling you, it doesn't matter who you elect if the people didn't choose them, and the people never do. Not only that, but there's a misconception in this country. You think your vote counts. Your vote doesn't count. The president is elected by the Electoral College, not the popular vote.
What are we going to do?
Well, we've got to wake up, number one. The biggest goal, the biggest task that we have in front of us is to educate the millions of sheeple that inhabit this country and the world. It's not just us that's in danger, it's the entire world. The New World Order will be a totalitarian socialist government. A benevolent despotism is what those at the top call it.
I don't even understand that.
Most people don't.
I don't even understand that. So what do you suggest we do?
Well,
Just sit back and...
no, don't sit back. You need to...
AK-47 and...
No, you should have something on hand in case everything falls apart to protect yourself, your family, and your community. But what I'm advocating is that if enough of us wake up and really become responsible and understand really what's happening and how the system works and understand that this is not a democracy, it's a republic, and democracies never work, they always deteriorate into socialism, and then a dictator rises up and takes charge. And eventually, if democracy lasts that long, it destroys itself with immorality and licentiousness. Look at the old Roman Empire, which began as a democracy. Look at all the democracies that sprang up and tried to survive in the past. Look what happened to them. You see, when you have one man, one vote, the people basically are selfish. They're greedy. They always vote themselves everything that they can possibly get until there's nothing left and everything disintegrates. If you want to sit back and let it happen, well, that's your choice, but I'm not sitting back and letting it happen. I'm just one person just like you. Educate your family, educate your neighbors, educate your community. Take our country back. As a republic, become once again what we were intended to be. Of, for, and by the people means that we have to know everything that's happening in Washington all the time. We are supposed to be the arbiters of our own fate. We must be the watchdogs of our government. We began as sovereign kings in our own right when this country was formed and the government was our chattel servant. We are quickly becoming the property of the government, which is becoming once again the Roman Empire. Now, this will eventually collapse too, but when it collapses, it will collapse into anarchy, and race wars will begin to rage across the landscape, and people will kill you for a can of spinach in your cabinet.
And I asked you, should I go and buy me a gun and protect myself? And you said no.
No, that's not what I said. I said that you should have those items on hand to protect yourself, your family, and your community. Didn't I?
I should already have that stuff already bought.
That's right. That's why our forefathers gave us the second article and amendment to the Constitution, was so that we could protect ourselves against a government should it become despotic and oppressive. And from a...
It's coming. I believe that. It's coming.
Yes, it is coming.
Very fast.
The purpose of this program is to wake the sheeple, empower the people, and try to save this nation and thus freedom for the world. You see, if we lose our Constitution and Bill of Rights, freedom will fall everywhere in the world. that it exists. This is the only place in the world that has a chance to stave off socialism. Socialism has always destroyed everything that it has ever touched. It takes everything away from you, including your dignity and self-respect. And you reach a state of total dependency, where the government becomes your father and you become a helpless child. And you pretend to work, and they pretend to pay you. Is that what you want?
You have a right to vote, but you are not mandated to vote. You don't have to vote if you don't want to. And not voting is a way of protesting. But if you'll look at how many people in this country have stopped voting, it's got to be the biggest protest in the history of the nation. People are saying, we don't believe in the system anymore. We don't believe you're going to represent us. We don't believe our vote counts. We believe it's a waste of time, and so we're not going to do it. We believe that the outcome is going to be the same whether we go and vote or whether we stay home and don't vote. And you know, folks, they're absolutely right when they think that. Absolutely correct. Only difference between Gore and G.W. Bush is Gore would have taken us there a lot faster, and Bush is going to slow us down so his buddies in the oil business can make tons of money before world socialism takes over. And if you don't believe, if you think I'm full of it, you know, I've never been wrong about this stuff yet. If you think I'm full of it, just...
Good evening, you're on the air.
Hello, Bill.
Hello.
Yes, I'm
Turn off your radio, please.
been doing research and, following up on the Masonic aspect of the New World Order.
Uh-huh.
And I agree with you when you say that this country is a Masonic republic, and I understand all of this. What I can understand is, if these people are so after world domination, why would they give us a chance in this great Masonic experiment? Why wouldn't they just have it locked down 100 years ago?
Because it wasn't a chance. It was a sure thing. They, under our forefathers, if you read their writings, they knew more about human nature than any psychologist that lives on the face of the earth today. They knew we would give up our freedoms in exchange for our liberties and preserve the republic. They also gave us everything in the Constitution that we could use to destroy our own selves. They understood that human nature is such that if we can get something for nothing, and if we think it's for nothing, that's the way we're going to go. And that's exactly what has happened.
So it was just sort of a hollow gesture, because they knew what the outcome would be.
Well, not only it wasn't a hollow gesture, they had to establish this country in order to give the common man a taste of freedom for the first time in the history of the world. This had never happened before. It was the catalyst that toppled the kings and queens from their thrones in Europe. It took away the power that opposed them. Number two, it was to prove to the common man that he could not rule himself. They knew that human nature, common man would through his human nature, his human foibles and failings, give up everything that they had given us, and then that would be the reason quoted to us in the New World Order why we cannot have those liberties or freedoms.
I see. And so actually this was set up as the power transference was taken away from the old the aristocrats.
That's right, and this country was the instrument which would bring into the world the New World Order, and it was all put into the Great Seal of the United States. If you know how to interpret the symbolism of the mysteries, it's all right there. Who they were, what they were about, and what they intended to bring about is right there in the Great Seal.
I see. Did you know that Albert Pike is buried in the walls of the House of the Temple in Washington, D.C.?
Yes.
Yeah. And also, what is the UN meditation room?
It is a place where those who understand the religion of the New World Order go to meditate and practice through symbology the religion right there in the United Nations.
Play right here first. I found this pretty interesting. A reference to breaking through the dome with Homer Simpson. Take a look here.
Tonight, Homer discovers a secret vault.
I saw weird, twisted, eerie, godless, evil stuff, and I want in.
On a brand new Simpsons tonight at...
There you go. It's all about masonry, all about partaking in evil. And you see the blindfold. This is all about masonry once again. Taking a look at this Masonic ritual taking place. And you see the blindfold. Again, it's all about masonry. Signs and symbols. Again, what they're all about. Now, let's take a look here. This one episode as you see these people raptured away to heaven. Let's see what's taking place here with the Simpson family. Raptured away to heaven. Lisa's being pulled up. One thing I find interesting, if I pause it at the right spot, let me back up just a tiny bit, and he does the devil horns right before descending down to hell. Trying to make hell sound like not such a bad thing. And again, the reference to falling through the firmament, the dome, as I shown before. I'll play it once again. With this scene here, again, just more mockery.
Steroid Santa Claus kicks and deals. It's a long fly ball going back, and the ball shatters the sky, bringing the ocean itself down into the...
Again, just a mockery of the Bible where it mentions God's firmament. This is what it's about. Again, people watch this. Millions and millions of people worldwide will watch this and have no understanding, no concept what this is all about. And again, this image with the so-called enlightened ones. And I'll play this clip as well, talking about enlightened ones. The same entire concept like I mentioned earlier. Truth in movies and lies in the news. Take a listen to what Mel Gibson says here, again, in this movie titled Conspiracy Theory.
Bush knew what he was saying when he said New World Order. Remember those three little words, New World Order? Well, he was a 33rd degree Mason, you know, and as ex-director of the CIA.
George Bush was a 33rd degree Freemason. Again, this is how they do it. They love to mock. Again, the world of opposites and duality, where nothing is as it seems. Now, again, for those that don't understand the whole entire concept of Freemasonry, I'll play a previous video showing all the connections with the 33 when it comes to such as Time Warner and CNN, the police departments, and so on. So people understand this whole scope, the entire big picture, not just when it comes to Simpsons, the whole basic world system, which is run by Freemasons from behind the scenes. The connection with Alex Jones, nothing more than a made-up character, and Glenn Beck. Let's take a look at this interesting connection. Alex Jones, again, this made-up character. Why do they give him the name Alex Jones? You just so happen to get a 33. Now, Glenn Beck, this Time magazine cover. And how people can't see, this is just an actor. You have the occult with Madman. I mean, everything, like I said, is devised for a reason. They don't just come up with these concepts for this title of Time magazine with Madman for no reason at all. Turn it sideways, and you get the MM for 33. Just like Marty McFly, Mad Max, Mickey Mouse, Minnie Mouse, Marilyn Manson, Marilyn Monroe, Michael Myers, the list goes on and on and on. All these fictitious names in Hollywood are basically made up to get that 33 with the MM. And now the connection again with Alex Jones. Take a look at this. Chaldean numerology. Glenn Beck just so happens to be 33 as well. So we have these two so-called truth speakers from InfoWars, which is Time Warner, and one with Fox News, the liberal station, CNN, and the conservative station with Fox News, and you get the 233. So what does this all mean? It all comes down to it. Everything is synchronized to get that number 33 with Freemasonry. I find it pretty amazing what's taking place. People, you know, they'll watch these two speak for years and years, and they'll fall for the deception, fall for the half-truths at best, and not understand what's taking place here in this deception. Now, again, I'll play my previous video, making the connection, again, with the world deceived in 5 minutes. With all the videos I make about the hoaxes and psyops, with so many people coming to my channel saying not everything's a hoax, they don't understand what's taking place, I'm going to break this down quickly and make all the connections necessary so people that are blind to what's taking place, they can see, even they can see the obvious. Going back in time, well before any of us in this world we're around, just take a look at George Washington, at this bust in Washington, D.C. Here is another one here. A little bit of a closer look. States here, George Washington, Freemason, and first president in that order. Okay? You're not going to hear about this in elementary school, middle school, high school, college, university. And why not? You need to ask yourself, why not? Why don't they tell us that George Washington was a Freemason? Why don't they tell us about Freemasonry in the school system? Because these are the ones behind the scenes that control it all. Taking a look at these images, you have Harry Truman wearing the Masonic fez that says Arafat on it. Okay. See Harry Truman again, fellow Freemasons. He's wearing the Masonic apron. Okay, you see it right there? Now, taking a look at Richard Nixon. You see the Masonic handshake. All working together, these world leaders. All on the same page. Gerald Ford, the Masonic fez. Okay? Now take a look here at George Bush with Skull and Bones. Now the connection, the pecking order from the top to the bottom. Let's take a look here at the police department. Taking a look at this Masonic police pin. The name police itself and the G. These both equal 33. People need to understand they don't devise these names out of thin air. It's always a reason for everything. Let's take a look here. See, police is 33 in numerology. Also, with the G, a very clever way how they devise the G. It comes to 33. A through Z, 26. Skip over, and you get the G for 33. So understand who controls the police department. These were established by the Freemasons. It's owned and controlled by the Masons. It's very easy to see when you have eyes to see. You see the gloves, the Masonic gloves. You see the checkerboard, just like the Masonic Lodge. It's very easy, once you put all the pieces together, to see what's taking place. Now, make it the connection from these so-called leaders, such as George Bush here, again to the police departments, now to the actors involved in the world stage, such as Robbie Parker and Emily Parker, his supposed daughter, the name Robbie Parker. Robbie is 33. So is Parker. Parker is 33. So, you see everybody involved in this matrix, and you'll see that 33.
These presidents and leaders of the kingdoms, owned by Satan, are friends behind closed doors, and laugh at the reaction they get from the peasants through the staged events they perpetrate. Sure, there were times when morals prevailed because the church was in obedience to the Most High, but through a series of stumbling blocks placed before them, they fell prey to wickedness, which quickly gave control back to the satanic elite. The whole purpose and desire of what we do is to wake people up from the matrix, so that they will see things for what they really are. The children of Israel, white, black, and brown, had fallen for an enchantment perpetrated by a false narrative called media and entertainment. They have given themselves over to fornication and abominations, which has allowed a curse to overtake them. Please see these things for what they are, no matter how hurt you may feel about your race or respect for your country. The enchantment can't last if we see it for what it is.
There are hundreds of channels. Can they all be doing this? What matters, though, is not the channels. It's who owns those channels. And that issue of media consolidation is critical.
The rise in the use of video news releases has a great deal to do with the conglomeration of the mass media. Because as more and more TV stations around the country come to be owned by the fewer and fewer players, there's more and more cost cutting that goes on in the newsrooms of these stations.
When you look at a media environment where only 5 or 6 companies control the vast majority of the world's media, and they work in collaboration with each other, and they share members of boards of directors and things of that nature. Like, in the same way that I say we have to broaden our concept of subliminal, I think we also have to broaden our concept of what a conspiracy is.
They're using our airwaves, and they have a responsibility to bring out the full diversity of opinion and to get to the truth, not to bring you news stories that are disguised as their own when they're simply government or corporate propaganda.
It's been Washington's biggest mystery since Watergate. What kind of dog will the Obamas choose? Our resident veterinarian, Dr.
We have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
And look, this is one time. Forget the conspiracy. Listen to our government agencies. These guys are telling the truth. You know, there's no conspiracy here, folks. Just get your damn vaccine.
All right, thank you, doctor. Thank you.
Mercury-containing vaccines may help, not harm kids, according to 2 new studies in the journal Pediatrics. There have been widespread concerns that mercury-based preservatives in vaccines might impair the neurological development of children. These new studies suggest that the opposite, that the preservatives may actually be associated with improved behavior and mental performance.
I think people should be careful when they wish war on China. You know, if China were to revalue its currency, or China is to start making, say, toys that don't have lead in them, or food that isn't poisonous, their costs of production are going to go up, and that means prices at Walmart here in the United States are going to go up too. So I would say China is our greatest friend right now. They're keeping prices low, and they're keeping prices.
Today, 6 corporations control all major media in the United States, including the principal television networks. These 6 corporate entities, in turn, control the information being broadcast on a daily basis. The average American adult watches more than 4 hours of television each day. The constant flow of entertainment, news, and information that is consumed by the American public shapes their perception of the reality in which they live. By controlling the dissemination of information, broadcasters and their corporate heads are able to control the masses. The constant, carefully shaped messages on television guide the public to predetermined conclusions.